I'm Father Dan Merz. I'm the pastor here, and this is Phyllis White, extraordinaire. So welcome to the Genius of the Body series hosted here at Newman. We've been doing this now for a little over 2 years.
Third year.
We're in our third year already, so it's exciting. So Phyllis will be talking about Humanae Vitae from Pope St. Paul VI, and kind of some of the theology, but cultural implications and human implications of that. And then I'll be talking about the theology of the body, which is kind of, in some ways, was intended to be a follow-up to Humanae Vitae. So let's just say a prayer, and then I'll turn it over to Phyllis, and we'll get started right away. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. We thank you for the gift of our creation. We thank you for how you have wonderfully, fearfully made us. And we ask for your grace to enlighten us, to form us, reform us in your image, to purify and renew us in your image, so that we may give greater glory to you, that we may be your spokespeople, representatives to all the world, to spread your goodness and glory to all the world. We ask for your grace tonight to speak well and to listen well and to ask well and to respond well. We trust in you, Lord. We thank you and we love you. And we ask the Blessed Mother, the beautiful example of goodness and holy chastity and love, to pray for us as together we sing. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Welcome in a particular way to all of our deacon candidates and to all those who are watching online. We're glad to have all of you with us. Phyllis.
Thank you, Father. You've got a jewel there, you know. Okay. Well, I get 30 minutes of what could be 30 years of a discussion about Humanae Vitae. So I'm going to have to inspire you to read it for yourself. That's my big job tonight, to make you want to read it for yourself, because that's where the real action is going to begin, and where you will be much happier with the whole picture, not just the highlights that I'm going to be able to give you tonight. So Humanae Vitae, of human life, was issued July 25th, 1968. And that was about 10 years, no, 8 years after the introduction of the birth control pill. And this was one of the big impetuses to writing this document. And prior to 1930, you got to know a little prehistory before it makes any sense at all, how we got to where we are today. Prior to 1930, all the Christians forbade contraception as a great affront to God's plan for life. But it was in 1930, at the Lambeth Conference, at the Anglicans, they said, okay for married couples to contracept they have serious reasons, then it's okay. So here was the elephant's nose under the tent. Right. Now, the church stands alone. The Catholic Church stands alone in her teaching. Now, at that time, the natural methods were calendar rhythm and basal body temperature. Now, these were state-of-the-art for their day. In 1932, calendar rhythm was developed by Dr. Ogino in Japan and Knaus in Austria. And they calculated so many days of fertility, so many days of infertility, so many days of fertility, and so many days of infertility, so on. Now, what they calculated was correct, but there was no way for the woman to look at her own body to say, did my body do what the calendar predicted that I was going to do? So it made it difficult to manage spacing babies. And the second development was actually introduced by a priest in Germany the use of the basal body temperature to mark after ovulation. So that was another step. But again, that only gave the woman an indicator of after ovulation, when her fertility began about a week before that. So you see, it kind of difficult. So that's the world was in great change. We had the Vietnam War, make love, not war. You know, we had the hippies. Vatican II, the church must be open to the world. Use the worldly things to promote the faith, right? The modern means of communication, etc. So there were rapid changes in the churches. You know, we got to get rid of all this frivolous stuff. Take these big old rollers down. Let's have it plain. And the liturgy was changing. It was all English now. And we expected things to change. This was women's liberation time. So in 1960, the solution was the birth control pill, and actually all artificial contraception. Surely the church is going to change her teaching and accept this solution to all our problems. That's what we were thinking in 1960. You know, we could manage this. The solution, we thought, were that women would have regular cycles. Never mind the fact that she wasn't fertile. She was just simply having an artificial bleed every 4 weeks with the birth control pill. And it was different from other kinds of contraception that people had. This was this little white pill that looked like a vitamin pill that you took, you know, every morning or every night. It wasn't connected to the act of sexual intercourse. So there was a big psychological disconnect there. But we thought it's easier to use than calendar rhythm. We'll be better able to regulate the family size and spacing. So we'll have healthier mothers, happier families, stronger marriages with less stress if you're not always worried about having another baby come right along. And we should use our own intellect to make these decisions. Now, yes, the church does say, use your intellect. Don't just be dumb sheep followers, but form your conscience. So, that's what we were thinking. And the Pope started the Birth Control Commission. It was referred to as the Birth Control Commission. They were studying the different problems of the day, population growth, why it was threatened that the world is going to starve to death by 1980. We're going to run out of food. We're going to have too many people. They were considering the cost of raising and education of many children. Well, we just can't do this. Working and lodging conditions, new technologies were coming along, and the principle of totality considerations. They're thinking, well, you know, if only a few acts of intercourse are contraceptive, isn't that okay if all the others are okay? So what would you say to your husband or your wife? Well, honey, isn't it okay if I just have one affair? Well, you'd say, why no? I gotta put up with that. So God says the same thing. He's not going to put up with that. No. The principle of totality doesn't fit. And we can never do evil to achieve a good. So that basic moral idea. Conclusion was to okay artificial contraception for married couples in difficult situations. This was a departure from the constant moral teaching of the church. So here we've got all this talk going on in the church. We've got it all going on in society. Things are going to change. Things are going to change. The church is going to change her teaching. So generally people were saying, oh yeah, it's going to change. The birth control pill is going to be just fine. Pope Paul VI acknowledged his own moral responsibility and said no to that solution, because it was deliberately suppressing God's natural plan for the transmission of human life. And what he said was, the marriage is the wise institution of the Creator and must be free. Should not be forced into marriage, free, faithful, only one spouse, faithful every day of your life, total. You give everything to each other. Become one. And fruitful, must be open to new life. You are starting a new family. It is intended to endure and grow by means of the joys and sorrows of daily life, in such a way that husband and wife become one heart and one soul and together attain their human perfection. That is our goal. Humanae Vitae actually said the most serious mission, notice it says mission and not duty. Who do you give a mission to? Somebody who's qualified, somebody who's good, somebody you think is going to be able to do the job. You give them a mission. It's not just a duty. The most serious mission of transmitting human life, for which married persons are the free and responsible collaborators of God the Creator. It's always been a source of great joys to them, even if sometimes accompanied by not a few difficulties and by distress. Now, is the magisterium of the church a competent person or individual or institution to make such decisions? Yes. She's an old mama. An old mama. And old mamas know lots of stuff. Think about your own old mama. 2,000 years old and very experienced in teaching and understanding the natural law written on every human heart. She knows. You remember when you were growing up and your mom or your dad told you to do something and you said, I don't see any sense in that. You stormed around for a while, and most of you probably did what they said to do most of the time because you thought, they might be right. They might be right. Sometimes we have to do that with what the church teaches. We don't understand it all at first. It'll take a while, and finally we will. If not, we'll have to ask on the other side, right? All right, now, the total vision of man that Humanae Vitae gives us. Marriage represents the union of Christ and the church. And we cannot separate the unitive and the procreative, the life-giving and the love-giving aspects of marriage. Each and every marriage act must remain open to the transmission of life. And we may do nothing before, during, or after the act to prevent the transmission of life. Now there's an asterisk there, because when you say each and every marriage act must remain open to the transmission of life, you think, oh my gosh, I gotta have all the kids I could ever have. No, not every act is fertile. Or as Humanae Vitae would say, fecund. Both words mean fertility. By nature, God knew we couldn't always have a new baby every time we came together. So he gave us sometimes of infertility and sometimes of fertility. And asked us, that's our user manual, use what I've designed for you. There's a reason. And he gave us a plan. The couple has times of both fertility and infertility, and it is knowable to them. There's a necessary time for bonding without babies and the time for babies. And the difficulties of temporary abstinence. We have the conflict of passions and reasons. Passions are feelings, and feelings change. So there is the necessity to dominate reason with reason. How many babies must we have? As many as possible? No. Together, a couple should consciously consider the physical, psychological, financial family situation with prayer and serious consideration. And they decide whether or not to have recourse to the infertile times of the woman's cycle, so as not to add another child to the family. And this is working within the plan of the Creator. At the same time, the couple should wisely have proper education in a modern natural method. And I would encourage all of you, because you're probably going to be given the responsibility of marriage prep in your parish, make sure that couple goes for their introductory session, which is the only requirement of the diocese, an introductory session to one of the methods that is offered by our diocese. Do that at the beginning of their marriage prep so they have time for proper instruction. I can't give them a piece of paper and say, you know everything you need to know. No, it takes a few cycles of charting and seeing that, oh wow, I can do this. I can recognize my fertility and my infertility. This is pretty cool. I didn't know I could do that. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Okay, the grave consequences of artificial birth control. The Pope anticipated that there would, if we accept this, We will have a general conjugal infidelity. What's our divorce rate now? 40-50%. General lowering morality. We said, oh no, these things aren't going to happen. We can control this. We really need this. Danger to the young, to give them an easy avoidance of consequences. When their hormones are running so rampant and we give them an easy way to avoid the consequences, what are we doing for them? Is that love? No. The man will lose respect for the woman if he constantly has access to her. And what about the public authorities imposing what couples are using to manage their families? Have we seen public authorities doing that? A time or two, you know. China, our own less obvious ways here. You know, every time you go to the doctor when you're pregnant, well, what contraceptive are you going to use? Oh, don't you think this is enough? I was in for a well mother checkup with my 6th baby. I was just there for a checkup, right? First time I saw him. And he says, well, how many babies are you going to have? And I said, I don't know. Don't cut off the hand that feeds you. You know, they never scheduled me to see him again. But anyway, the Lord provides. Why not occasional contraceptive? Like, again, that principle of totality applies. You can't contracept today and then next week not. It doesn't work that way. Put it another way, is it okay if I'm unfaithful to my spouse most of the time? But not all the time? Well, I am most of the time. Doesn't that count? No, doesn't count. God qualifies the call. He will give us the grace and the courage to do this. Feelings are feelings, and feelings go away. Here we have 1960, the threat of overpopulation. By 2025, we have more deaths and births than half the world. It takes 2.1 children per woman to stabilize a population. We're not doing it. 1968, Humanae Vitae. 5 years later, we got Roe versus Wade. So as soon as we began to really accept contraception, well then abortion was our next move. Divorce, 2.2% in 1960, 40 to 50 in 25. Fatherless homes in 1960 was about 25%. Or, I'm sorry, that should be the reverse. Today, it's about 25%. 1960 was only 12. Unwed mothers, 40% now. 1980, 18%. I didn't know. Many theologians joined the huge backlash. It was huge, absolutely huge. The average parish priest said, oh, follow your conscience. But there was no real teaching on how to do that. And you're going to be responsible for helping people to follow their conscience and train their conscience. How do you do that? How do you do that? And the beaten down pastor rarely spoke about it. And today those beatings are worse because there are more problems for the priest to manage. You got to replace the $200,000 air conditioning system and heating it. Work with the couples who are struggling with marriages. Work with the unwed mothers, the teenagers that are in trouble, and so on and so on. So we're going to have to help. We're going to have to help spread the word. That is the reason you don't know much about Humanae Vitae. And the engaged couples that I've seen in the last 10 years since I've been in Columbia, not one. Yeah, there has been one. She graduated from Tolton. Not one knows about Humanae Vitae. They just don't know. The challenge of Humanae Vitae, to public authorities, men of science, to Christians, husbands and wives, support your other couples, support each other. The apostolate in homes, your children will know whether or not you are following church teaching, even if you never say a word. They know. You know what mom and dad are doing if they're accepting church teaching and trying to live by it. Doctors and medical personnel were challenged. Find reliable means for couples to space their babies that really need help find reliable means. To priests and to teach, to bishops to make sure it happens. And, well, God, it's too hard. It's just too hard. You know, a little contraceptive won't hurt, will it? No, most of the time we're good, so faithful, but it's too hard. God qualifies the called, and you are called. Give your 5 and 2, the loaves and fishes. It's all I got. What you have, God will multiply it 100-fold. And I want to give you an example. 1968, Dr. Tom Hilgers, MD, OB-GYN. Have you ever heard of him? Anybody? Little tiny, one person here. Okay. He was in medical school, or was maybe already resident, I don't remember. He said, I want to read him Humanae Vitae. The chaplain at the Newman Center said, why do you want to read that trash? Well, that just challenged him even more. Give me that copy. He got a copy, he read it, and he said, this makes sense. This makes sense. And he took up the challenge, and he researched the Billings ovulation method, because the cervical mucus observation was the most, in his research, the most reliable indicator of fertility. And it could be recognized by every woman at any stage of her reproductive life, all around the world. And you didn't need any equipment. I've had occasion to teach it in the jungle of Brazil when I visited my priest brother. And yeah, people understood, they knew it. He researched the Billings method and standardized it for better research. Now, you talk about God getting back. Well, that led to the development of the Creighton Model Fertility Care System, which is spread throughout the world. I've had occasion to train teachers in Poland, Canada, United States, Korea. It's cool. You never know what God's going to do when you get involved in this work. And the science of nanotechnology. That's the new women's health science, which looks for the cause of the problem. It just doesn't cover it up with the Band-Aid of the birth control pill or IVF. And that has spread throughout the world. Now, Help Father Dan's project. He answered the call. He spearheaded a project called the St. Gianna Women's Clinic to offer real Catholic women's health care through nanotechnology in Colombia. Help it along with your time, your talent, your treasure, and your prayers. And the last words that I have for you today, as Charles, read it for yourself. Pray, study, and trust in God's plan. You will never give him more than he gives you back. Go with God. Yeah. Copies of Humanae Vitae. I like this version. It's the 15th anniversary version that I get from Pauline Press in St. Louis. But I like it because it has excellent commentary. There are a few times there will be an extra commentary at the bottom of the page. It really adds to your understanding of the whole project. But you can get it online like he did. Print off your, how many pages? 19?
10 pages.
10?
At least 6 puzzles in this one.
All right.
Okay, thank you very much, Phyllis. And we will have, after I do finish my talk, we'll have some time for questions and answers. So if you have some questions from Phyllis's talk, hang on to those, and we'll get to that here soon. So, you know, Phyllis mentioned in her talk the Birth Control Commission that Pope Paul VI set up. One of the members of that commission was a bishop from Poland who went on to become Pope John Paul II. And she mentioned that the majority of the commission members had voted to vote in favor of artificial contraception, and he was one. Carol Wojtyla was one who said no, and his argument was, well, not his argument was, but we'll get into his argument actually, but But what he said, after Humanae Vitae came out, he was very much supportive of it, but he said Pope Paul VI gave the decision and the prophecies and the teaching, but didn't really get into the rationale behind it, and the whole to make the case for this. And so that's something that he wanted to do. And when he became Pope in 1978, over the next several years, he used many of his Wednesday audiences to give an extended meditation on the first 3 chapters of Genesis. And those talks have all been put together into a single publication that we call today the Theology of the Body. So how many of you have heard of the Theology of the Body? Most of you have. Well, the deacon candidates, you guys just had a talk on that, right? A couple talks on that. Yeah. So John Paul himself was a brilliant thinker, but he's also kind of more philosophical in his mindset than he was very theological as well, but very philosophically minded. So when you read his actual words, it's kind of thick. It's kind of hard, deep. So there's been a lot of really good popularizers to what he wrote. Jason Everett, Matt Fradd, Christopher West, etc., many others as well. So I'm going to try to be one of those popularizers right here in the time that I have with you to give you an introduction to the theology of the body. So, and it's kind of it's a vision of human sexuality, a Christian vision of human sexuality. When I went through this material, most of it, there was some stuff that I was like, oh, I'd never heard that before. But a lot of it is just like, well, yeah, that makes sense. And I think I knew this already. But what was new was it gave me a vocabulary to use for all of these things that I thought that I kind of already knew. And in a sense, getting that vocabulary was brand new for me. And it just gave me a whole different way to think and talk about human life and human existence and human relationships. Okay? So Phyllis kind of touched on this a little bit with Humanae Vitae, but society has its own model of human sexuality. No commitment. You can have multiple serial partners. No responsibility. That's kind of what contraception is, right? I don't have to think about things or have a conversation about things. That was one of the things that jarred my memory when Phyllis mentioned talking about contraception, where the husband becomes kind of a user of his wife. I've had numerous conversations with women who have come in to see me and said, my husband and I've been on the artificial contraception for 20 years, and I really feel like he takes me for granted. And he's a good man. I'm not saying that. She stands up for him, but says, I feel taken for granted. Not uncommon. No restraint. Why should I practice periods of abstinence, when I don't have to? And no purpose. I remember I used to teach in the college seminary up at Conception, and one time I would go through some of this with the college juniors, and there was one guy, he was in a later vocation, and he just came in and he's like, I don't want to talk about this. And I was like, why? Why don't you want to talk about this? He said, well, I feel like we're always talking about this. I said, no, it's thrown in our face all the time, but we never actually have a conversation about it. And that's what Humanae Vitae and Theology of the Body are encouraging us to do, is to actually, what is the purpose of relationship, of sexuality, of sex? Right? So here's a definition of sexuality. It's an essential part of the human identity. In other words, there is such a thing as a human nature. God has created us. And he's created us to be in a certain way. And there's freedom in that. But if we cooperate with our nature, life just works better. You know, if I, as an engineer, if I make some kind of a device, you know, and use it according to how it was intended to be made, it's going to work. If I don't, it's not going to work so well. So sexuality is the energy or the drive to be in relationship. It's what keeps me from wanting to be just an isolated island. I'm not a rock. I want to be in relationship, whether that's with God, other human beings, with myself, with creation, with nature. I want to be in relationship. Family, friends, romantic relationships as well. Via my interests and hobbies. And then, that's the first thing, right? Is that energy or drive to be in relationship. And then comes how my sexuality gets directed. I have this desire. Okay, and then where is that desire oriented to or directed to? Okay. And sexuality is not merely instinctual. We have been given the gift of reason. We can master our instincts. We're called to master our instincts. If we don't, the world is chaos. And one aspect of sexuality, Christian sexuality, is what we call affective maturity. What is affective maturity? It's how my sexuality gets disciplined. How I become master of my emotions, master of my mystery. How do I learn to cope with disappointment, with frustration, failure, fear? How do I deal with all these things? We experience those on a regular basis, even with the people we are closest to. Right? How do I deal with bullying? That's not just something for kids in school. that happens with adults as well. I have a friend who teaches, she used to teach middle school, now she teaches high school, but she always says adults are just like 7th graders. Or 7th graders are just, they're just like adults without the inhibitions. Or adults are like 7th graders with inhibitions, put it that way. All right, so here we get into the theology of the body more explicitly, okay? The Pope describes 3 original experiences at the root of every human experience. He says that, sexual desire and lust are not the same thing. Okay, I remember there was an article in the New York Times several years ago that talked about how lust was an essential part of the marital relationship. Well, you just completely are clueless about the word lust means, or trying to redefine it, or redefining what the word love means. There's desire, and that's a good, healthy thing. But lust is a perversion of love, a corruption of love. All right, so the first original experience, the first is original solitude. And then there's original unity and original nakedness. So in Genesis 2:18, after God has fashioned the Adam, the man, and breathed his spirit into him, he says, "It's not good that the man should be alone. I will make a helper fit for him." And the next thing that happens is that God brings all the animals before Adam to name. But in naming the animals, Adam doesn't find anyone to love, anyone fit for him. Original solitude was a realization that we are not like the animals. We're different from them. Because only Adam has the breath of God breathed into him. None of the other animals were created in that way. In his solitude, God was teaching Adam. It's like, did God not know that those animals wouldn't be a fit helper for him? Well, yes, but he's teaching Adam and all of us that we are really made to be the partner of God. And union with God is the only kind of union that will truly overcome our solitude. Solitude points to the spiritual aspects of our nature. It's not a bad thing at all. Remember, this is before sin has entered in. So solitude is not a sinful thing. It's not a bad thing. It's something that pushes us to be in relationship. And it reminds us that we're made for God. The meaning of life is not union between male and female, but union between human and divine. The male-female relationship is about being a helper, or male-male relationship, or female-female relationship. Friendships are about being a helper. Helper to what? Helper to the true solution to our solitude problem, who is God. So solitude is the foundation for communion. My solitude makes me desire companionship, friendship, love. And that's the second original experience, is original unity. If everybody has an inescapable awareness of solitude, then everybody also desires a helper in their solitude. And we all help each other in that regard. So no friend or spouse is the answer to the solitude problem. God alone is. Okay. So the spousal relationship, in a sense, is the biggest, the deepest help to the relationship with God and to the comfort and consolation that we all have in our solitude, or need in our solitude. The Catechism says, interestingly enough, in marriage, the physical intimacy of the spouses becomes a sign and a pledge of spiritual communion. The union of bodies was designed to express a spiritual reality. If we don't first have spiritual communion, then the union of the body will be a lie. Sex is a means to communion, but it must be preceded by spiritual communion to be meaningful, to not to be exploitation, which is one of the reasons, interesting enough, why the church insists on communion in creed before we share communion in the Eucharist. You and I must know each other well enough. We must know the church well enough. We must know God well enough in order to enter into communion with each other. And this is precisely why the devil attacks and exploits our sexuality so forcefully. Because he doesn't want it to be an expression of the Spirit. Because if it's an expression of the Spirit, then it will get us in touch with God, and he does not want this. How many people think that sex is the last place to look for communion with God? It was not so in the beginning. There's an interesting quote from Pope John Paul II. He says, "In every conjugal union of man and woman, there is renewed, in a way, the mystery of creation in all of its original depth and vital power. Man and woman, uniting with each other in the conjugal act, return in that way to that union in humanity, flesh of my flesh and bone of my bones, which allows them to recognize each other, and like the first time, to call each other by name." He says this means reliving, in a sense, and this is powerful, reliving, in a sense, the original virginal value of man, which emerges from the mystery of his solitude before God. Virginal value. We tend to think of virginity in a pretty restricted sense. You're a virgin. That means you haven't had sex. You lost your virginity. Oh, you had sex. And the Pope says that's a very materialistic understanding of virginity and sexuality. Rather, a true conjugal union is a living of the truth of virginity. Because virginity means the integrity of body and soul, the integratedness. In other words, when Adam and Eve, before the fall, engaged in the conjugal union with the body, it was also a becoming one in spirit. It was no loss, but a great gain. In a sense, it is not sex that causes us to lose our virginity. Rather, after the fall, we all lost our virginity. We lost the union of body and soul, the integrity of body and soul, meaning that now we often do things with our bodies that are not good for our souls. True virginity would be the perfect integrity of our body with our soul. That's why we call Mary the Blessed Virgin. Not because she didn't have sex, but because she had this perfect integration of body and soul. Sin divides. There was no division in the heart and soul of Mary. So, original unity, God brought her to the man. The man said, "This at last is bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, because she was taken out of man. Therefore a man leaves his father and mother and cleaves to his wife, and they become one flesh." She's the crown of creation, the climax of creation. She's the most beautiful thing the man has ever seen, right? When the Lord brings her to the man, first time he speaks, first of all, and he speaks poetry. After that, he never got much of a chance to speak again. But it was a good start. Beautiful start. And, that's where we get the word woman, really. Because he's like, whoa, man, she's beautiful, right? Good job, God, right? Thank you. And that's why guys get into trouble, right? I can't think of anyone who ever confessed in the confessional, I was looking at rainbows on the internet the other day. This is really beautiful waterfall. No. This is why we get into trouble, right? So there's something, God was acting beautifully in this way. All right. The third point is original nakedness. And the man and his wife were both naked and were not ashamed. Kind of a weird thing to say, but it's really an important point. Contrast that experience with our own. We experience shame in our nakedness. Imagine you're alone in the shower, naked. There's no shame in that, right? But if then you step out of the shower and a stranger is standing there, what's your reaction? Ah! We cover certain parts of ourselves. Or maybe if you're a guy feeling really good, you go, boom! What are you doing here? There's this immediate instinctive reaction that says, this person's not going to look on me and see all of me. They're only going to see the externals. They're not going to see the whole person. When Adam and Eve, before the fall, looked at each other in their nakedness, they saw a body that reveals a spirit. They didn't just see the external body. But in this regard, in this example, this person can't look on me with love. It's only perfect love that casts out fear. Adam and Eve, before the fall, had perfect love to each other. Original nakedness shows a full awareness of the original meaning of the body as the revelation of the person. What does the word intimacy mean? I've heard the ones, into me see. Without intimacy, we can't look on another's nakedness and see past their external body. We will not be able to see into them. The deep goodness of God that the naked body is intended to reveal. When Adam and Eve looked at each other, they said, "Behold, you are very good." We had trouble with that. We experienced shame in our fallenness. When nakedness makes woman an object for the man, or vice versa, it becomes a source of shame. The fact that they were not ashamed means that the woman was not an object for the man, nor he for her. Now, if you give yourselves to each other in love, then you image the exchange between God and humanity. Right? The exchange between husband and wife is intended to image the exchange between God and humanity. God gives the gift, and we receive the gift. We receive in order to give back. Right? Within the male-female husband-wife relationship, who images the giver? Anyone? The male, right? The man. Stamped into the man's body is giver, and stamped into the woman's body is receiver. She receives in order to give back, right? And that's an image of God in relationship to humanity. That we call that I think that's next here, the nuptial or spousal meaning of the body. Stamped into our bodies is the call to love as God does. There's a profound truth to this exchange between male and female, giver and receiver, though we have to be careful in our fallen world, fallen nature, that initiator does not come to be understood as dominator or master. That's what God said after the fall. Right? To the woman, your urge shall be to your husband, but he will dominate over you. That's not God saying that's how I want it to be. That's God saying that's what you've done to yourselves because of sin. That's how males have traditionally treated females. And it's because of our fallen nature. And we can't blame the woman. It's our disordered hearts. Adam was the initiator with Eve, but he never dominated over her until the fall. In the beginning, sexual desire was experienced not as this compulsive urge, an itch needing to be scratched, but as the desire to love as God loves. The compulsive urge is the result of our loss of virginity, integrity. Before the fall, if Adam desired to enter into communion with Eve, he had to trust in the freedom of Eve. He couldn't grasp her, take her for himself. He had to trust in her freedom to make a gift of herself back to him. What's the extreme denial of the freedom of the gift? What's the extreme denial of that in human male-female relationship? We call that rape. Where the man just takes. Doesn't matter if she wants to receive or not. And that can happen even within marriage, when sex is forced or coerced. The freedom of the gift is a freedom to bless, which is a freedom from any desire to grasp or to possess. So it's always a good question. Am I in control of my passions, or are my passions in control of me? Right? Freedom means mastery of oneself, self-control. And that's indispensable if I'm going to be a true gift of myself to another. Now let's look at the fall. Why does the devil go after the woman in the garden? Anybody ever heard this before or thought about this before? Why does he go after the woman? Because she's weaker, right? That's what I always heard growing up. The woman is the weaker. And the Pope, John Paul II, says, no, that's not the case. The devil goes after the woman. Think back to the male-female relationship imaging the human-divine relationship. The devil wants to prevent humanity from receiving the gift of God. Right? And in relationship to God, God is the giver and humanity is the receiver. In relationship to God, we are all feminine. We're all receivers of the gift of God. So the devil goes after the woman as the one who images all of humanity in receiving the gift from God, and he wants to stop that. He does not want us to receive from God. That's his number one goal. Original sin is precisely man's denial of the gift. What's the devil say? What? Did God tell you that you'll die if you eat of this fruit? You won't die. God's a liar. God's actually not a father. He's a tyrant. He's withholding a gift, not giving a gift. If you eat of that fruit, you will become like God. The devil's trying to convince us that God is not good, to get us to not receive the gift of God and just grasp after it for ourselves. That's why the devil goes after the woman first, because she's the one who symbolizes man's reception of the gift. Now, what happened in the garden? When God says, don't eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, it's a statement saying, you're creatures. You can't determine what is good and evil. God alone is the arbiter of good and evil. But the devil is saying, you decide for yourselves. Don't let God tell you what to do. He's trying to keep you down, keep you in ignorance, to make you slaves. God is not your father, but your master. And Pope John Paul II writes, this is truly the key for interpreting reality. Original sin attempts to abolish fatherhood. Original sin attempts to abolish fatherhood. How many times in the course of history have two people been seduced, had sex, the girl gets pregnant, and the guy wants nothing to do with the child or the woman? In other words, he's not accepting his own fatherhood. God is not a father, he's a master. Original sin attempts to abolish fatherhood. When the disciples asked Jesus how to pray, what does he teach them? Our Father. The devil tempted Adam and Eve to deny that God is a loving Father. In that moment of temptation, what they needed to do was to pray the Our Father. No, God is not a tyrant who withholds the gift. God is our Father who gives us our daily bread. I will not grasp after my own kingdom or my own will. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done. In this moment of temptation, deliver us from evil. That's the importance of this prayer that still has relevance today. It strengthens us to name God as Father and to remind us to be willing and eager to receive the gift that comes from Him. There are two basic postures in the world. There's the posture of receptivity, of reception. What's that look like? What am I doing? Receiving. It's like we do at communion, right? Or there's the posture of grasping. If we believe that God is love, and God desires to fulfill the deepest desires of our heart, we just need to be open to receive. If we do not believe this, we'll grasp after whatever we want. It's so much a part of our lives we don't even see it. Children do this all the time, right? Papa, can I have a cookie? Well, sure, buddy. I'm your father. I want to give you a good gift. And before you can even take the wrapping off the cookie, give it here. Papa, give it here. We all have trouble waiting to receive the gift. If we believe in the Father's love, we need only wait to receive the gift and be thankful for it, which is Eucharist. Be thankful for it. Eucharistic hearts. The devil wants us to reject the gift and grasp it for ourselves, and that's what Adam and Eve did. Eve saw that the tree was good for food, pleasing to the eyes, desirable for gaining wisdom, so she took some of its fruit and ate it. She did not receive, but took. Now listen to these words about Christ from Paul's letter to the Philippians. Have the mind of Christ, all of you, who, though he was in the form of God, Adam and Eve were in the image and likeness of God, did not regard equality with God something to be grasped. Rather, he emptied himself. And if you're empty, the only thing you can do is receive. When we grasp for ourselves, we deny the gift in God, and we lose our capacity to be a gift to one another. If I'm not willing to receive the gift from God, I will not be willing to receive the gift from anyone else. Now, what happens after Adam and Eve deny the gift from God? They begin to deny the gift of themselves to each other. They feel shame in their nakedness. We were afraid because we were naked, so we hid. They've lost their ability to see each other as a person. All of a sudden, it's like, wait a minute. You could hurt me. I need to protect myself from you. And I could hurt you when you make me upset. They've lost the trust in each other. Their nakedness is no longer revelatory of the inner gift. They're hidden. We hide from each other. We try to hide from God. Shame is the natural form of self-defense against the danger of being treated like an object. And so we cover ourselves up. The protective sense of shame. Call it modesty. But then what happens next? They begin to blame each other for the disorder of their own heart. So men say things like, well, I wouldn't have this problem of lusting after her if she wouldn't dress so darn sexy. It's her fault. It's the woman. No, it's your own heart. We want to blame others for the disorder in our own heart. And Jesus' moral teaching was aimed precisely at affecting the heart. His teaching says, you've all heard it said, you shall not commit adultery, but I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. And Pope John Paul II says, are we to fear the severity of Christ's words, or rather have confidence in their ability to save, and their power to save? For many years, I always looked for ways to kind of explain away those words of Jesus. He couldn't really mean that, right? No, he does. And he's calling us to something so much higher. When I'm lusting after another, my heart is over, the law is here, and my heart is over there. Christ came to put law and heart together. Okay. So, in his teaching on theology of the body, he gives those three original experiences before the fall, and then he goes through what happened with the fall and the consequences of that, and then he gives a whole section on what's our sexuality look like under redemption. How does God go about redeeming our fallen sexuality? God's plan for women, who is, as I said, the climax of God's creation, the image of humanity in receiving the gift of God's love. These are truths about women. They are called to be the master of your own mystery. Women can generally experience their fallen sexual desire as geared toward emotional gratification at the expense of a man. Men will use love to get sex. Women will use sex to get love. But if you're called to be the master of your own mystery, not to weaponize it, but to master it, to where there's not this need, but this gift. In both the Song of Songs and in the book of Tobit, there's some beautiful language here where the bridegroom refers to the beloved as my sister, my bride. And we look at that and we can say, well, that's kind of weird. Why does he call her his sister? Is he marrying his sister? No. But the biblical teaching here is that before I can look at you as my bride, I have to first look at you as one who shares my humanity. you say, you know, you don't do those kind of things with your sister, precisely, right? I want to be able to look with love and not lust at my sister. And then I can look with love at my bride. The Song of Songs also refers to the bride as a sealed fountain, a garden enclosed, which is another way of saying master of your own mystery. You know, you are the one who decides who to unseal the fountain to, who to open the garden to. And you have to, you know, you want to wait and see if is this an authentic offer from this man? Even my husband, is this an authentic offer, or do I say, go away for now? Right? So redeeming sin's consequences. Your urge shall be to your husband, and he will rule over you. How do I redeem that consequence? How do I master that urge? You know, by spending some time in solitude with the one who can overcome my solitude. By helping others in that same way. God's plan for men. Men are called to be initiators of love. There was a priest on a college campus some years ago who started off Mass one time. He had a whole room full of college males and females, and he asked the ladies, how many of you have been asked out on a date in the last week? And very few of them raised their hands. And so then he spent the rest of the homily yelling at the guys for not being initiators in love. Right? Now, in men's defense, which is not a good defense, we are fragile, emotional creatures. Truly, sincerely, we are terrified of being hurt, terrified of being rejected. And to make an authentic offer is to risk rejection, even within marriage, right? An authentic offer can be, not tonight, not today. You know, and that might have taken a huge amount of courage. But men are called to take that risk, to face that fear, and to be initiators of love, and to be protectors of love, right? Protectors from ourselves sometimes, but protectors of love. To have something to sacrifice for, train for, aspire to. That's part of the plan of redemption. So learning to look with love and not with lust. Mastering the lust and the fear that's behind that lust in our own hearts. Chastity is the virtue, this is for males and females, the virtue of gaining control of one's impulses and actions. It's a spiritual energy which knows how to defend love from the dangers of egotism and aggressiveness. It's not about repression, but learning to love fully each person in accord with his or her state in life, whether they're single, married, celibate, in their God-given dignity. The sacrament of reconciliation is a necessary part of this redemptive process. Regular reception of the Holy Eucharist, part of that redemptive process. Having good models, good friends, the communion of saints is such an essential part of the Christian life. Jason Everett has the chastityproject.com. Christopher West and many others have Theology of the Body. Those are some great resources. Okay, and as Phyllis was advocating, practice natural family planning. It has this built-in rhythm of abstinence and beauty and gift. And listen. The word obedience comes from ob audire, literally on account of listening. Obedience is what I do on account of listening. Who am I listening to? To my passions? Disordered passions? To the Word of God? To the church? To my beloved? Who am I listening to? Right? I think that's what I have there. I'm a little bit past time, but let me just wrap up with saying something last. Actually, I'm just going to stop there. So, Phyllis, I invite you to come on back up. Yeah, thank you. Time to wake up, right? Time to wake up. All right. Hey, you too. Thank you. All right, we'll open it up if anyone has any comments or questions for Phyllis or myself, and we'll be happy to respond to some of those. As Phyllis said, there's a lot more that can be said about Humanae Vitae, and if you ever, the Theology of the Body book is about that thick with all of his lectures in it, so there's a lot that can be said on either side. Comments, questions?
They're shy, they don't want to talk. When I will start, I like the cyclical letter was when I learned about it at the conference for the first time, when our first session of Theology of the Body, when Father Correr mentioned it about it. So I took a note, and that day I went home and I downloaded it. Because I said, he's talking about this, so I have to, what it is about. And what I like about it is, like you said it very clear, John Paul II, his writes are very thick, but Paul VI, his writing is a lot easier to read.
This is true.
And so I enjoy reading it because it was really, really awesome. And there's someone
Yes?
What do you think is the right age to start introducing kids to these ideas, to these truths?
I think from very early on, you know, I don't know. I mean, certainly, I would say even before puberty would be good. I think there's resources for teaching theology of the body that go all down to, like, you know, yeah, kindergarten, first grade, second grade.
First grade, kindergarten.
Yeah. You know, it has to be adapted to that level. You know, get into some concepts, but certainly how we're created and how we image God and how we relate to each other, that's essential.
You said it.
There are books, like I think a while back I got some of it, like the Ruah project, but they have some things that like for kids about like what does it mean to be a gift, to receive a gift, like talking like that kind of language is really good.
That comes from the Ruah Woods
Yes,
Institute.
that's coming.
Ruah Woods. I know that from their interviews on the Sunrise Morning Show on EWTN. It comes on at 5 o'clock in the morning, so if you're awake, yeah, plug it in.
They interview them frequently, and it's all good stuff.
Yeah.
I'm curious about the intention with natural family planning. I'm thinking of the verse, spilling your seed on the ground.
Right.
And like, is there a problem with being open to life as your intention and then trying to avoid life as an intention?
So here's it's a great analogy or example image, and let me speak to kind of twofold question there. One is that the idea with we can use natural family planning with a contraceptive mentality, and that's not what the church intends. So couples are called to be open to life and generous, but there can be good reasons to space a pregnancy, you know, and that's a conversation that should be had between, the church doesn't say how many children to have, but that's a conversation between husband and wife, and we hope that they would let the Lord lead that conversation, certainly be a part of that conversation, you know, and to have those conversations with generosity. There can be lots of good reasons to say, you know, overwhelmed, you know, with work or having had just had a baby, or emotions are overwhelming right now, or finances are overwhelming right now, or sickness in the family. There can be lots of good reasons to space a pregnancy. But that doesn't mean that the love, the intimate love between husband and wife needs to be put on hold as well. And so cooperating with how God created the body is a good and holy thing, as long as I'm not approaching it with lust, but with love, you know, a sincere gift. The interesting thing with Onan, spilling the seed, is within the sexual intercourse, it's not spilling the seed. It's still giving the gift to the beloved. And there's some interesting things, you might elaborate on this more, but scientifically or medically speaking even, you know, when the woman receives the seed of her husband and absorbs that, even if she's not fertile at that time, her body absorbs that, and it, what's the word, kind of, her body becomes more receptive, open to, like acclimated to her husband's DNA. And so it prepares the body to become pregnant later on and to be more accepting of that. So it has those good effects.
Yes.
Do you want to add anything there?
I think you said it.
It's a great question, though. There's all kinds of interesting little things like that, you know, like how the bodies kind of interact with each other and can help each other in that regard.
So that's already asked a question, and I didn't get the answer, so I will ask you and try to find out the answer. So is morally an issue when a couple using their open to life, and they decided they would like to try to choose the gender of their kid? And this is about the days that she is going to be fertile, try it earlier, and I think you know what I'm talking about.
Okay, all right. We want a boy, or we want a girl, is that the question?
Yes,
Yeah,
of course.
okay, all right. Well, first of all, it's amazing how many people don't realize that it's the father who provides the sex of the child. Okay, now, there's a little bit of a theory here.
Works.
Little theory, well, sometimes. The woman has a vaginal discharge, the cervical mucus, which provides nourishment and a travel medium for the sperm. That occurs about 6 days before ovulation, more or less, because we're not machines, right? So let's say the mucus begins on Monday, but the egg isn't ready until Friday. The couple has intercourse on Monday. They're swimming around nice and healthy, nice and happy in the cervical mucus. Perhaps by Friday, the little boys will be too tired, and the little girls will win the race to the egg. That's the theory. All right, now, you could ask Dr. Joe Stanford out in Salt Lake City. He has 7 sons. If you want to try, I've seen people try and they didn't get anything.
I got 2 girls.
Good.
She was a girl. I mean, she was open to boy. But,
Okay, well, that was nice.
and I told her, this is the trick. You want to try this? So I'm asking if I did it wrong or.
I don't know. I don't know. I have 4 and 4. What does that tell you? I don't know.
And the science behind is that it's X and Y.
Yeah.
The Y is weaker, is faster, but the X is healthier and stronger. And
Yeah,
it's
a
good to
little
last
bit stronger. Yeah. There you go. Anything else? There's a lot of infertility. People are waiting until they're in their 30s after they get their career done, well established. Their fertility peaks in mid-20s. So the job will wait. It really will. So if you have occasion to counsel couples, hey, get your family going first. You don't know that you're ever gonna get any. You know? We have a lot of infertility. I had another call today. Secondary infertility. Fortunately, she's only 30, so not 39, like many of the calls are, you know. So, yes.
I do have a question in that regard. Has there been any research that the pill, if somebody had been using the pill, that you are more likely to have infertility problems when you stop?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you just kind of have to look at the, you know, people who have been on the pill for years and years and years. You know, probably they wouldn't have gotten pregnant anyway after all those years. But, yeah, it does. The younger they start, the more the pill suppresses maturity of the woman's reproductive system. And it's not uncommon for mothers to take their daughters and make sure they get on the pill as soon as they start periods so they don't get pregnant. Yeah, it's not helping. Yeah.
It's an interesting thing as well that there's an impact. I mean, we talked about the importance of fatherhood a little earlier, but that's really important in terms of family life as well, because you know where the father has a strong leadership role, Christian leadership role in the family. The girls especially, but the guys too, but the girls especially will respect that. They'll wait. They'll have a greater sense of their own dignity and to mastery of their own mystery, so to speak. And part of that is, you know, because my father's love is, you know, I before I give myself to any man, I want to make sure that my father approves and is okay with this, and that's a beautiful thing. So I think there's a big impact there that the father can have on the chastity of the kids and mothers as well, for sure. Yeah.
So I think it's more common than I thought it was, but I've heard of particularly younger generations, I guess. And I don't know the medical terms, technical terms or whatever, but even people who are virgins when they get married, okay, man and woman, say they're both virgins, a lot of women, young women, are pretty nervous about that, okay? And so whatever the membrane is, I don't know what you call that breaks, a lot of women have that done medically before the wedding. I mean, is that like considered like sinful
Is it sinful? No.
to do something like that?
No.
I don't know, I'm just asking.
No, ordinarily, in the course of a kid's life, that hymen will be torn long before she's married. But if for whatever reason it's still intact, it can be basically slit without any great amount of difficulty.
Okay, I just didn't know if
Yeah.
there was anything like.
No, and certainly there's still nothing morally wrong with
Or
that.
like hormonal that is different,
No.
that, you know, between the man and the woman if
No.
that had not had that done.
Piece of skin.
No,
I mean, I don't know, I'm just, I've
No.
heard of this, so I'm
Yeah.
just curious.
no, it shouldn't be a problem. It's not a moral problem. It's just one of those little medical things that occasionally, it's very occasional, not a common thing.
Not to make too big a deal out of that in any way, but it is kind of interesting that sometimes from a biblical perspective, that's been likened to like the veil to the Holy of Holies, so to speak, you know, and only the high priest goes beyond the veil, you know, and only when he's authorized to, when it's an authentic gift, so to speak.
And that's why I was, you know, when this individual told me this, that that's what they were gonna do, you know, that kind of made me nervous, because, I mean, how do you know that that's gonna be painful for you if you've never been there? And why wouldn't you want that with your spouse, you know, wedding night and the whole thing, you know what I mean, and the whole analogy that you just used. I mean, I don't know, it just,
All right, could I say something?
yeah,
Chances are, first intercourse is not gonna be very comfortable for the woman.
right. And I understand, and that's
Yeah.
why the woman was
And
nervous.
chances
about it.
are she'll have a pelvic exam before she gets married. And that would be noticed at that time and could be taken care of medically if it were still intact. Hymen.
Mhm.
Okay?
Yeah.
I would just say one other thing, you know, that's kind of interesting that I didn't really realize fully until just a few years ago, really. But, I mean, I had known this for a while, that from just a physical, neurological, emotional perspective, you know, the one flesh union binds people together, right? It causes changes in the brain's chemistry so that the two are kind of bonded. And some of the effects of that are that there's a relaxation, a sense in which, you know, well, you know, the endorphins kick in. Well, it's okay, I'm not angry at you. You know, it makes it easier to kind of overlook faults and failings, and it, you know, makes the guy tired, the guy tired so that he stays there. So there's that opportunity for intimacy even post intercourse. So the interesting thing that I hadn't realized until a few years ago, I was talking to this guy who had been dating this girl, and they were getting very serious, and they even started talking about getting married, and they were really doing it right. They were really being very chaste in their relationship, affectionate but chaste. And then at the last minute, he said, you know, I don't think she's the one for me, and so he broke up with her, right? And I don't know, it was a few weeks later, he came in and was talking to me, and he's like, Father, what's wrong with me? Am I a jerk? What's wrong with me? I'm like, what are you talking about? He said, well, I'm not heartbroken. I should be more heartbroken than this, aren't we? You know, what's wrong with me that I'm not heartbroken? You know, we're still friends. I still talk. I enjoy talking to her. You know, it's a little bit awkward because, you know, but we still get along fine. I should be more heartbroken. I'm like, you know, the light bulb went on. Who are dating and are having intercourse, you know, they're acting like they're married. They're getting bonded together, and then when they break up, it's like going through a divorce. You're tearing apart the two have been made one, which divorce is horrible in that regard, right? It's this ripping apart what has been made one. And so we have all these broken hearts throughout our country and world because they're not following God's plan. You know, they're jumping the gun. Whereas the two of you were friends. And then when you decided not to get married, guess what? You're still friends. Now maybe, you know, there needs to be a little bit of heart healing going on, but nothing like what is otherwise happening. And it was such a beautiful light bulb in terms of God's plan. Amen. All right, any other thoughts or comments? All right, we have some refreshments, I think, in the back, and time, if you want to just hang out and visit, we can have some more conversation later on. Thank you to those who are with us online, and thank you all for being here tonight. God bless.